Hello, everybody. I don't know if you're having difficulty in getting into the virtual class session, but my understanding is that this is the time for the virtual class. So if you are having difficulties at your end, maybe you will still be able to get in. If not, this recording will be there and you can view the recording. Now, also, I want to mention how, first off, you're all doing a wonderful job in the class. You are really making sure that you understand the topics and the material. This is all based on your answers to the exercises, how many of you took the time to program the programming projects and actually complete a program, or at least looked at the code and submitted some code and logic, being that the logic is the most important part of the answer to those programming project questions. Also, your midterm exam is coming up on the first day of week 8. So there is a lot of material that you need to go over. However, as you do, you're just going to be that much better prepared for the exam, as well as master the topics and material for operating systems. There is a lot of material, but hopefully you started in week 1 and started reviewing the material, so every chapter you were able to know before you started to learn about the next chapter. So that would be the best strategy. So if you didn't do that strategy, do now do that strategy when you continue forward. So as we go through weeks 8 up until the final exam, make sure when you're going through week 8 to go over and review the material as much as you can. Don't just read material just to answer the exercises. You need to know all the material. So I will continue to give you the some additional optional exercises that will help you. And it's a good strategy to take those lists of topics and write out definitions or summaries for yourself. And again, you'll be operating system experts by the end of this class. So the more you take the time to review and re-review the material, the stronger knowledge you will have on the material. And that will be very helpful for you, not only for this class and taking the exams, but also for the workplace. It is the workplace that is where your knowledge is most needed. And it is there that it will be apparent if you actually know the material or not. You can copy and paste maybe answers from your classmates in the classroom, but you won't be able to do that in the workplace. So it is a matter of you just actually buckling down and learning the material. So every week, learn those week's topics very well, so that when you come and have to study them for the final exam, you will be all prepared. Now, for the midterm exam, I did post material in the discussion forum, as well as emailed to you all the files that will help you and be good study guides for you to use for the midterm exam. There is that study guide that you got, which is a list of topics, excuse me, a list of topics as well as some short question answers. I also gave you the solutions to the exercises for the chapters, and also I created a presentation that contained all the optional exercises and questions that I gave to you every week with the answers and the list of the topics for each chapter. So I think if you can go through all that material and know it, you will be very well prepared for the midterm exam, as well as remember that material, since it will be covered again in the final exam. So learning it now is a very good strategy, so that when you come to the final exam, you will then be prepared with at least these chapters from 1 to 11. Okay, so being that nobody is here, I do not know if there was a time issue here, or again, your lack of ability to get into the class, to the site. I'm not sure, but I am then doing this presentation now, and it will be recorded so you can review it. So chapter 10, we went out where contains material on file systems. This is maybe the more familiar and frequently used operating system operations that you deal with every time you use a computer, because when you use a computer, you are typically creating and using files. So some of the concepts in these chapters, chapter 10 and 11, may be familiar to you. You do save files, you do create files, you have a hard drive where you access files. So this information then just discusses, again, the different types of strategies that operating systems can use and the variety of strategies that exist for operating systems when dealing with files and hard drives, or the storage of the files. So chapter 10 goes over the file concept, access methods, disk and directory structures, file system mounting, file sharing, and protection. The file system. A file is an abstract data type defined and implemented by the operating system. Now you should be familiar with data types for any of the program you did. Data types are just a storage and memory. You give it a symbolic name and a variable, a symbolic name, and depending on the data type will determine how much memory is allocated for that variable. So think of a file as a variable. It just has some information in it, and it is stored, and depending on its size will determine how much memory needs to be allocated. But it's very important because this is how we interact with our computers. This is how we create things. This is how we view things. This is how we store things. So the file system consists of two distinct parts, a collection of files and a directory. The directory is the storage of these files so that, hello, I'm glad you can get in. I wasn't sure if there was a problem on your end in accessing the Blackboard Collaborate. So I'm glad to see you. I am recording this so that you can review the beginning part that you missed, but you didn't miss much. All I did was go over the midterm exam and also strategies to study for the midterm exam. So I did post material in the discussion forum. There are 3 files again that I emailed to you. There is the midterm study guide, there is the midterm presentation, and I also then gave you the solutions to all the end of chapter exercises. So these are great study tools for you to use as you study for the midterm exam. I should ask you, can you hear me okay? Okay, good. Excuse me. Okay, so I emailed files to you, and then I did post information. Your midterm exam is the first day of week 8, so I'm going to go over, I did give you that material, and also after I go over chapters 10 and 11, we'll look at the midterm study guide to see if you have any questions. And also, as I mentioned, it's important that the study guide is a good start for studying for the midterm exam, but a strategy that you hopefully have been following is that you studied each chapter as we went over it. So every week you need to really understand the topics for that week, go over the chapters that are covered for that week, and this way will then prepare you then for when you are not only studying for the exams, but also for the workplace. Right now, the studying is not just a matter of completing this class, taking the exams, but also you need this knowledge for the workplace. And in the workplace, you won't have your classmates to help you in understanding topics or give you answers to some of the exercises. You have to just know it. So the more time you put into it now as you are learning the material, the better off you will be and the more knowledgeable you will be. And that'll be very important in the workplace. But the strategy, if you haven't already, is every week when you have chapters that you need to understand, make sure you go through them very thoroughly during that week. That then will prepare you not only for the exam, but also for the workplace. So again, there's the exercises at the end of the chapters. There is the extra optional questions that I give to you, and also the topics. So make sure that you understand that material during that week, because this way it'll be easier, then you'll understand it, and it'll be faster for you to study when you do have the exam. So next week we will just continue on with week 9. I'll start introducing week 9 material until we perhaps have the answers to the midterm exam. I have to wait till all sections go through the exam before we can review it. But do see, if you do get your exams back, that you see what answers you got correct, which ones you have wrong. So if you have any questions on that, bring it into the discussion forum or bring it into any session that we have. So welcome everybody. I'm glad you're all arriving now. I was worried for a second that maybe you had trouble at your end, or there was discrepancy in the time. We had a time change here. We have daylight savings time, so I think I matched it correctly to the time. I know you do not have that time change, and we do. But as everybody's coming, let me at least go back through from my start. Okay, so Chapter 10 now. Again, hopefully you reviewed everything. After I go a little bit over Chapter 10 and 11, we'll look at the midterm study guide. And again, I emailed material to you, additional material, and I posted material in the discussion forum for you to use for the midterm exam. But Chapter 10 is about file systems, and if there's anything we know most about, and that is files, because that's what we use when we interact with the computer. So we create files, we view files, and all these operations that we do with files, delete them, create them, read them, open them, and so on, is operating system operations. Now, some of these files, though, we use another program or an application program to create that. So when we use an application program to create our files, that application program will include additional code material or additional key code. So that is included in our file as we create it. So in order to open that file, we have to use that program in order to open it. So that's when we'll be looking at file name extensions and why these extensions are there. But in general, again, you should be familiar with files, how you access them. We'll be looking at how to access them on the disk drive, how the directory that they have. And again, as this course is progressing, we know that every concept offers all possible strategies in implementing that topic. So it gives you an idea then of all the possible strategies. However, any one operating system, typically we only use one or two, a few of the strategies. So always use the case study in front of you, whatever operating system you work with, and use that as a case study to understand more in depth that strategy that is used for file systems or any of the topics that we are looking for in the exploring in the classroom. Because what you have in front of you is a typical system you will see in the workplace. And the more in depth you understand those popular systems, then the better employee you will be, and the more knowledgeable you will be, and considered an asset to the company. Okay, so files again is a data type, typical to any variable you use when you program. Don't forget, the operating system is just a set of programs. So a file is considered like a variable, and it has a data type. Just like when we use any variable in our programs, they are a symbolic name for a memory location. Same thing here. File is a particular variable that has the data type as a file, and it is a memory space that contains information or data. And any file system consists of two distinct parts: a collection of files and a directory structure. We know this every time we look for files, every time we use files or we save files, we see a directory structure. In for Windows, it starts off from C:, that's a root directory. That root directory is designated typically on the hard drive. And then you will have additional folders. and subfolders. And that would make the directory system. And that directory is a hierarchical in nature, which means it's like a tree structure. You have folders and subfolders. You have parent folders and children folders. So whenever you have a top level and you have some levels shooting off of a top level, that's right away indicative of a tree structure. And one major task of the operating system is to map the logical file concept onto physical storage devices. We already looked at this in depth when we covered virtual memory. We have the physical memory, but we need to do more. So we have a virtual or logical view of memory. Same thing here. We have a logical file concept that is then put into physical storage devices. So the operating system has to keep track of that. When does the file begin? When does it end? What program is needed in order to open that file? If it is a Word document, it needs to be opened in Microsoft Word. So the operating system needs to first start Microsoft Word and then load the file so that the file can be understood. If it's created by Microsoft Word, it needs to be opened in Microsoft Word because Microsoft Word adds codes and keywords to your file, and it is only that program that understands those codes. There are some universal file formats. That's the ASCII or .text file format. Now that typically can be opened in any program. Any program can open that file, but once it starts introducing codes or specialty keywords and information in the file, then it's only that program that can open the file. So that is something then the operating system has to keep track of. Not only it's going to be able to locate a file, it then knows it has to know what program to open. And that typically is noted by the file name extension. And then also the operating system has to have some security control and protection for files. And then in Chapter 11, we're going to cover implementing file systems, file system structures. Again, this is going to discuss the variety. There's a variety out there. We're going to look briefly at all of them. And then NFS is a very popular one because it's very good for distributed systems or client-server type systems. And that's commonly what we see today. So whenever you are on a network and you want to access files, they typically will be on a file server. So you need to access that file on a file server, and then it is brought to your workstation or your computer, and then you can use that file. But then when you are accessing, if there's multiple users, multiple servers, then there's a lot of information. It's not only the operating system then that works with these files, but also a network operating system that works with these files. So you may have a combination of operating systems helping you in navigating and using and getting access to your files. So issues surrounding file storage and access on the most common secondary storage medium, which is the disk drive. And in Windows, you have a drive letter. And this drive letter is what points the operating system to the port or to the access path where this information is stored. And files can be allocated space on the disk. And we have three different ways: contiguous, linked, or indexed allocation. So when it's contiguous, it means it just begins from the beginning to the end, and that's how you'll access it. Linked, it is linked by a pointer, depending where it is on the drive. And indexed, again, it's just going to have some kind of additional information as to where it might be stored. So it's things that we will look at as we explore chapters 10 and 11. So the file concept, you're familiar. Again, this is something you should be familiar with. It is everything that we use when we work with a computer. Everything is in terms of files. There's your text file, the source file, executable file. So it can contain all kinds of data. And you really will know if you have a file that needs a particular program in order to open it is when you open a file in a different program and all you see are cryptic type of characters. That means you opened it in the wrong program. For example, taking a Microsoft Word document and trying to open it in Microsoft Excel. It won't work because there's particular codes and additional information that's added to the file so that it can be displayed as to how you think it should, how you created it, but it needs that particular program to understand those codes. Source file. Source file is typically those files dealing with programming language. You have your source file for anything you create in Java. That would be your .java file. Executable file, that's if after you actually translate that file into machine code so the computer can run and execute it. Java is unique in the sense that there's two types of files that are created. It compiles in a two-stage process, but that's a good thing because it can then be used, that's why it's popular for usage over the internet. Anything that is machine independent is compiled by the designer or the programmer. Anything that's machine dependent then waits till it gets to the user's computer and then is compiled according to the machine that that user is using. But there are other programming languages that are compiled and have a .exe, such as C or C++, and that has to then be opened or used on a computer that just understands those executable files. So there's a restriction as to how. That's why if you ever did download any programs, if you download programs to your computer off of a website, it will ask you, okay, do you have Windows or do you have Mac OS? Because you'd have to have a different version of that program than downloaded to your computer, depending what kind of computer you have. So information about files, these are the attributes, all kinds of information that needs to be stored about the file. So this is something that you can go through. And again, use your computer as a case study and go look on your computer. Look at a file and see if all this information is there. And how is it listed? Or how is it made known to you, this information? In Windows, you have the Windows Explorer that brings this up. And then there's operations. Now, some of it, yes, you can do through your operating system, and some of it you can do in any application program. So typically when you are in an application program or even a database application, you will have these operations available to you, but what some of them do is they just kind of give you access, or they access the operating system commands to then implement these functions. They don't do it themselves. They just kind of have an icon or menu option where you will click, but it's actually then pointed to the operating system, and then the operating system takes over and completes this operation. You're not aware of it because maybe you're in Microsoft Word, but some of those options that you use for file manipulation is actually just like a window into the operating system, and it kind of releases the control to the operating system to complete that task. And then open file locking. I don't know if you've ever done this, but if you've ever been in a program and it says read only, or it gives you a note, this is being shared or being edited by someone else, so you cannot do this. So there has to be some locking if these files are multi-user, because you have to be able to let one user at a time, modify. This kind of goes back to that critical section of processes. When you have that critical section of a process where it cannot be interrupted, this is an example here of where that's a critical section of that process, so that file has to be locked. Anybody else, they can read it, but they cannot do any editing for it until this editing is completed. So a very simple example of your critical section for processes, which is something we discussed in previous weeks. And then there's file structure. You have to know how large is your file. Just like we knew about memory allocation or only access to processes, same thing here, file structures. How large is the file structure? Is it doesn't need another program in order to be opened up on the computer. So this is a lot of complex decision-making an operating system or an application program needs to do when working with files. The extensions, again, these extensions are very important to file types. Right now, if you are using a graphical user interface such as Windows, you really are not you don't see the extension. What you see is an icon. You see like a little picture of maybe a blue W that lets you know this is a Microsoft Word document, or a picture for PowerPoint, or a picture for Excel, or even when you look for your programs, if you look for your Java program, and so on. But this is what tells the operating system what kind of file it is to determine how to open it. What program needs to be started first in order to open your file. If you have a movie, obviously you're going to have some movie program. Then, can play movies, open up. And you also have this option in your operating system. You can determine which one you want, what program to start when you see this kind of file. So it's telling the operating system right away. If I see a DOCX, that means start Microsoft Word. Or if I see an MPEG, start then, Windows Media Player or Movie Maker if you're in Windows, what have you. So this goes hand in hand with the operating system to tell the operating system what program needs to be opened so the file can be opened. And also you have an option then to set all these as well. These are like the default programs, so that if the operating system sees this extension, by default it knows what program to open. And you can change it, depending on what kind of programs you have. Also, this works for maybe compatible programs. But for example, say you use, there's a lot of word processors out there, or there's WordPad. But WordPad, instead of opening up WordPad, you want all WordPad files, since it's word processing, to be opened in Word, because they are compatible. So some are compatible, but then you can determine and say, I want all of them to be opened in Microsoft Word, even though they're not all Microsoft Word documents. They might be from Open Office, which is a compatibility, or WordPad, or even a text file. You may open it in Notepad, or you might open it in Microsoft Word. So that's a little bit that you have where you can customize how these files work. And then access. How do you access your files? This all is determined by the storage device that is used. Typical tape drives are sequential. CDs, so your hard drive is direct access. In other words, they can jump right away to where that file location is. But again, the operating system has to know where that file is so that it can access it if it's a direct access. Sequential, it just starts from the beginning, but it has to know where the file starts and where the file ends. So any questions so far on files? Are we familiar with files? I think this is the most familiar topic you may have because it is something that you use all the time. So any questions so far on files? You understand? And no questions. I'm assuming that's what you mean. Okay, good. Oh, I'm glad. Yeah, one thing I wanted to bring up to you. I know in our last lecture there were some questions that maybe we had different answers. Now, one thing is, for the midterm exam, if you do see that question, you would choose the answer that I gave you or the answers that are listed in the midterm exam presentation, because that is the key I'm using, and when they grade your exam, they're going to use that key. So the answers that I give are the ones that you would choose when you take the midterm exam, because that's how it's going to be corrected. Okay. If not, well, then you can maybe tell them and, fight about it, but it might be easier just to use the answers that I gave you for now. But when we discuss the midterm exam, we'll go over then where there's maybe some discrepancy in the answers. But for now, it's just better for you. It's easier than when you take the exam, because then you'll be marked correct, even though the answer might not be exactly correct. But it's just, the way things are, in the online world or in the exam world. Okay, good enough. Okay, now directory structures. Again, you know directories, you've seen them. Every time you put down a folder, you see them, maybe another list of folders and files. That's considered a directory. Hierarchical directory structure is what Windows uses and Mac OS uses. So a disk can be subdivided into partitions. We have different kind of disks. When you have a computer, when you just buy a computer, the disk is automatically loaded with this structure. It already has, you know, some files there for you. The operating system is set up in the folders it needs, and you maybe have something called for system files, and another folder for users, another folder for public. So there's a lot of, everything's already set up for you when you get your computer. That means on the hard drive it was formatted and stuff was loaded on it for you. And all this information is stored by the operating system, so it knows. When you go and you jump from My Documents to My Music, it knows how to follow you and knows then where to point in the hard drive in case you want that information and you want your music files. So all this information is kept track of by your operating system. And as we know, there's a lot of information associated with your files, as is your disk. Your disk has a volume number. There's tables there that would then store the information about what is on that drive disk. So there's a lot of information that's stored, and it's the operating system that takes care of it. But you can have partitions. Some people have two operating systems on their drive. That's called a dual boot system. But again, it's a way of partitioning your disk drive, so that maybe on partition A you're going to have Windows, and on partition B you're going to have Linux, for example. That is very doable. You can do that, and then you'll be working with both operating systems. Every time you start up, it'll ask you, what do you want, Windows or Linux? So that's a good way for you then to learn Linux if you want to. Linux is a popular operating system used in the workplace. You will see, typically in a workplace, you will see a variety of operating systems. So it is a good idea to be familiar. You may have a whole, department that uses the Mac computers. So that would be Mac operating system. And then you'll have another department that uses Windows. And that would be then obviously the Windows operating system. And you'll have another department that uses Linux. Or Linux has Linux on the computers to use. So you'll have a variety of them. So it's a good idea to be familiar with all of them. And you can, actually put Windows and Linux on your own computer if you wanted to start learning both of them. It's a good way just to practice and learn them. Okay, types of file systems, general purpose, there's special purpose. Solaris is discussed pretty heavily or pretty much in this chapter because the Sun Microsystem and Solaris, they started the workstations. They typically was the operating system used when you have a bunch of workstations. Typically you will have this in a development environment. So understanding these files too are necessary because if you're doing a lot of programming or software development, you kind of have to know where these files are because obviously you're going to be using these files, and workstations typically will share files. So it's similar to your client server type of architecture, but it allows access to a variety of files and directories and folders that are not necessarily on your own workstation. If anything is on your workstation, there may not be anything on your workstation. You're just using everything out on the servers, or specialized systems. So it's a little bit more complex in keeping track of everything when you have a multiple number of workstations. Single level directory, a single directory for all users. That's one strategy. So these are kind of apparent as to what they are. 2 levels. And then we have tree structured directories. This is what we use. This is popular with Windows. So these are the different advantages to each, so do understand the difference here. And path names. Now these are very important if you're doing any program. Absolute path names means you start your list. All file names are associated. You don't just have a file name, you also have a directory listing with that file name. In other words, you're going to have the folders. Say you have a file and a folder. Okay, you access the file and give the file a name, but actually the operating system also adds onto it the folder name because it has to be able to find it. And in order to find it, it has to start from the beginning and have all the names of all the folders that will then be associated with that file name. So that is the absolute path, is when you reference it from the top all the way down. You have the names of all the drives and folders or directories until you reach your file. That's absolute. Relative sometimes is a way when you do program, you don't have to list all the information from the top. It's automatically going to assume that it is in this location, and it kind of adds on the information all the way from the top for you automatically. So relative means you don't specify all the information, but it gets added on to your information automatically. Absolute is where you actually specify it all the way from the top down to your file. So that's the difference. What's nice about, or when you would use absolute over relative. Absolute is needed when you are going to be placing this on another system. So there may not, or it might be changed to a different system. So the absolute path needs to be designated. Relative is when you already have the information, you're going to stay in that location that you are, so it automatically can run every single time because it's always going to add the information automatically for you, and the information it adds will never change. So that's the difference. Okay, file system structure. Again, information about your files. How does the operating system keep it? There's a file control block. We should know we have a process control block. Control blocks are a popular type of terminology used for information about an object. We have a process control block. Now we have a file control block. And the information, every time you look at a file, if you right-click on your file and choose Properties, this will give you all the information on these paths. And the paths will have the information from the top, and I'll give you an idea of the information that's associated with your file. But then again, there's additional information. Don't forget, we have a logical view. That's the logical view of our folders or our files. However, there's actually that physical view. And that physical would have information like drive, cylinder, track, sector, memory location. So that's additional information, and that's more your physical information that the operating system needs to take your logical or your symbolic information and then convert it to the physical information. So we have logical file and we have a physical file, a set of information. The operating system converts the two or translates the two. Same thing goes with websites. If you think about websites, when you do a website address, you type in words. But really, it's actually translated to an IP address that is actually numeric and has some physical connotation to its name. So do make sure here then you know the difference between a logical view and a physical view. And that pretty much goes with anything with the computer. We know that already with memory. We had a logical view and we had a physical view of the actual memory locations. And same thing here for your external storage devices or any type of other storage devices aside from RAM. So here's your typical file control block, information. Now this is information when important. I mean, if you program or anything you do, this information is taken into account, especially when you have rights. Typically, you can assign rights. It can only be, a file can be read-only. It can be archived. It can be hidden. There are some system files that are hidden from the user, and the reason they're hidden is so that you don't change them, because they're very important files, and they don't allow users to see them, so they're hidden files. There's read-only, or who owns it, who has access levels, file permissions. If you ever try to access something on your computer and it says you have to contact the administrator, that means it's, has some special permissions on it. And then your allocation. So we have linked. These were the ones that were clicked. This is what linked looks like. The file allocation, there's indexed. So there was contiguous, linked, and indexed. So those are the three variety types. And these are the examples. So do make sure you go over them. Things to worry about. Again, operating system may use a variety of these depending on what you are doing. So performance, depending on your performance, how fast can you get access to it or create something? So this is the information. There's some variety of information about different systems. As for speeds and so on. So efficiency and performance, so do understand the differences here. Again, so do go over this. And then there's the NFS. And I'm kind of going to go through this quickly only because I want to get to some of the questions that we had. So make sure you understand NFS. What that means is very popular and it's very well discussed in your textbook. And if you want additional information, just Google it and you'll get additional information. That's the layers of NFS. Again, it's client-server. Perhaps you like the visual view. Okay, now week 7 assignments. You did have your assignments here. These are your exercises. If you look at the midterm exam presentation, you will see the answers to this, so use this when you then study for your midterm exam. These are your questions. And then here's the optional exercises. And then these are the answers. Yes, you still have to do this week's assignment, yes. Every week. Because if it's in the grade book and you get points, then it has to be included. So that's how you get points for your assignments. You have to complete them and you have to upload them to the grade book so that I can then give you credit. An exclusive lock, here we go, just something. Again, we're talking about exclusive locks. We have already witnessed them at when we talked about processes. Same thing here. Think of files or the working or operations with files as a type of process, and I did mention that. The critical section, an illustration of a critical section of a process is when a file is being edited and it's locked, so that the reader-writer was another example of an algorithm for processes. Very similar, the reader-writer, if you want to just think of it as reading or writing to a file, same thing. So an exclusive lock behaves like a writer lock. The simplest file access method is sequential. But do know what these others are so that you do understand them for the midterm exam. If you were creating an operating system to handle files, what would be the 6 basic file operations you should implement? Yes, these are the ones you typically will do with files. You'll create them. You'll write them. You write to them. You read from them. You may be repositioned within a file. Think of this as copying and pasting, or cutting and pasting, deleting a file, and truncating a file. So this is the minimal set of required file operations. Okay. Distinguish between an absolute path and a relative path. Again, this is what I just mentioned before. Absolute means you have all the information about that file from the top. It lists the top drive, the letter for if you're looking at Windows, it's the drive letter, and then every folder all the way up until you have the folder where your file is. That's considered absolute path. Relative means you only have perhaps just the file name, and it automatically will add all that information for you. Okay. Any questions between absolute and relative? This is very important, I think, if you do any programming or any manipulation of any data, typically. Yeah, this will exist if you're doing web pages, if you're doing databases, if you're doing spreadsheets. This is a very important concept because, again, you have to determine if you need to specify all that information from the top. In other words, specify an absolute path name, or you can do the relative path name. So web pages, when you have a variety of web pages or images on a web page, you have to determine if you're going to put it as an absolute path name or a relative path name. So these are important concepts to understand. They are illustrated and revisited in every single application. Okay, transfers between memory and disk are performed block at a time. So these are the answers to the additional exercises I gave you and we talked about in the office hours. But I'm giving you the answer now so you have them to study for the midterm exam. And then here, order the following file system layers in order of lowest level to the highest level. Devices are always the lowest, then your input and output because you have to have a path, a flow. Then comes basic file system, then comes file organization module and logical file system. So the answer is D. But that kind of goes back. There was a diagram in the textbook reading from the top, starting with application on down. This is just going up to the top. Any questions on this? Are we good on all of this information? So the matter of the study, metadata includes all the file system structure minus the actual contents of files. Now I gave you also some short answer. So there'll be a variety again of questions on the midterm exam for multiple choice, true, false, actually fill in the blank and short answer. So hopefully as you study you'll be able to do all of them. How is a hash table superior to a simple linear list structure? This is an important concept too. If we are looking at security now, hash tables are algorithms. We did look at this also when we did memory allocations. But it is a way of converting your address. You maybe add something to it. You do some calculation with the location to come up with a new location. And it's the new location is where you're going to store something. So it's just why they have hash algorithms is because sometimes you can find your files faster. Now, if you have a million of files, yes, it takes time to look for files, or it takes time to, look for it to retrieve it. So these are strategies used to help the operating system locate information faster. Sequential is always the slowest. Sequential, you'll have to start from the top and then go until you find your file. Direct access, if you have the information to know exactly where it is, that's the fastest. You can just jump to wherever it is. But this is important too when you're searching, again, when you're doing any kind of programming, any kind of applications for searching. For searching and security, there's a lot of strategies to either make it more secure or to find it faster. Sequential is not always the best. So depending on what it is you have and how you're looking for it will determine then sequential, like if you want to think of sequential as being like an alphabetical order. Sometimes things are not in alphabetical order. You always need to go in the middle all the time. So then you would use a different type of algorithm or strategy to do that. And then here's another exercise. Look at section 11.42 if you wanted to look at how to do this. Okay. No, that's exercise 10. Okay, here's the study guide. So here's the sections to concentrate on. In other words, the bulk of the midterm exam questions will be based on this information in the study guide. So yes, you will concentrate on this, but remember, in order to understand the material for the workplace, you need to know more than just what's on the midterm exam. So it's important to know everything, really, as much as you can. Again, the strategy is every week when you're given material, use that week to really understand the material. And then when you go back and review for it for an exam, you'll understand it that much better, and then you'll know it that much better, because after you take an exam helps you study too. It helps you understand material as well. In case you didn't know, maybe you got the question wrong, but then you'll know then what is the correct way to understand it. So the midterm study guide is what will help you for the bulk of the questions. The questions I give you, some of those questions may be on the midterm exam. So do definitely study that. So again, just to recap, I did post in the discussion forum the midterm review presentation and the midterm study guide, as you see here. And then I emailed to you those 2 files, as well as now I emailed to you all the solutions to all the exercise questions at the end of the chapter. So you have those as well. So you have a lot of good information to test yourself and to study from. Obviously, you would start with the list of topics and then a brief summary of those topics for yourself. Review them in the textbook. And then use these questions. Use these, thank you, you are quite welcome. Use the questions to like kind of test yourself. And then when I gave you all those optional questions, if you didn't understand it, I gave you the section number in the textbook to look so that you can understand it better. So now little things, it would be great if you could go through all the exercises and all the optional questions without having the answer, and then you will know the answer after you read the question. That's the ultimate goal. So hopefully you'll get to that point. Again, you have all this time to study now, but moving forward, if you didn't, every week, make sure to go over that chapter. Go over and you want to read it, you want to take notes on it, you want to make sure you understand the topics, that you can actually just, understand what they are, what they mean, and important concepts, and be able to do the exercise questions as well as the optional questions. Again, it's not a matter of just studying for the exam, but it's also for understanding it for the workplace. The workplace is a little more demanding than just a class, even though you say right now and you think that this exam is the most important, but no, it's actually the workplace, because that's the one where you want to make sure you have no choice but to know things. If you do not know it, then yeah, you're going to be in trouble. So hopefully this helps you then with studying. Here are some examples of the short answers that were given in the midterm study exam or study guide. So again, this is based typically what we're doing now in these chapters. So hopefully you can, if you don't know these, look it up as you read if you haven't, or reread the chapters. If you have any questions, post them in the discussion forum. You have now until now, and the first day, Sunday, when you have your exam, so you have time to work together and study together. Have study groups. You can go ahead and ask each other those questions or those exercises and see if you can know the answer by yourself. I gave you the answers. You could review the answer, but then if you mix all of them out from all chapter 1 through 11, see if someone can give you that question and you will know the answer. So that's a good way at the end, after you review everything, see, that'll help then, again, to know if you really understand it. Those answers you know right away and you can give, then you know it. Those answers you may be not too sure about, then you have a second chance to look at it quick and understand it better than for the exam. So that's the best way to study for the exam and also to understand the material for the workplace. Again, you won't have exams in the workplace. You just have to know the material, and they're going to know if you know it or not just by talking to you or, seeing what you can do. So, I wish you the best of luck on the exam, but do know that you should take this farther. So as soon as we have the answers to the exam, we can go over it in the class. And then if you didn't understand something, we can go over it so you do understand it. And Again, not only understanding it for the exam, but understanding it for the workplace. Okay, with that, if you have any questions, anybody have any questions? Okay, just so you know, midterm exam is on chapters 1 through 11. You have various guides, presentation, and solutions to study from, and also those list of topics. Again, as you read a chapter, take that list of topics and write down right away, take notes. I think that's the best start. And you could use that then to review from, and then test yourself on these practice questions. If you can get these practice questions with no problem, and the exercises at the end of the chapter with no problem, then you definitely are most prepared for the exam and will have no problem for the exam, and you'll have no problem for the workplace. So I'll give you the extra time of 5 minutes, a little under, but there you go. You could work together, maybe set up some study groups so you can get together and study these information together so that you can then have no problem with the exams. So good luck on the exam. When I see you next month, next office hours, we will start already week 9 until I get information about the midterm exam that we could review. But good luck. And also, if you have questions about a question you had on the midterm exam and you weren't too sure, bring it then to the office hours on Monday, and then I can maybe give you the answer. Then you'll know if you got it correct or you didn't. So feel free to do that. So we can take the time on Monday then to go over questions you have on the midterm questions. Say you gave one answer, but you weren't sure if that's the right answer, so then I can give you the answer and let you know. Okay? So good luck with everything. You got a lot of good material. I know you're going to be operating system expert. So it's on Monday. I thought it was Sunday. Do you have different days and times? I'm sorry, last class session somebody said Sunday. Okay, so you have it Monday. Okay, then we can review again on Monday if you have it on Monday. All days you have tests for all your classes, huh? Okay, if that's the case, then maybe if you don't want to come to the office hours or the virtual class, that's fine too. If you'd rather take that time to study for an exam, you could do that. Just then post, if you have questions, post in the discussion forum when you have time. Good luck on all your exams. I wish you all the best.